Hello there. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and read this out loud. I just need everyone to follow along and find evidence. Wait, did you go through directions with the kids, Mr. Geisler? Are you sure? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. We've been talking about claim, evidence, and elaboration. What do you mean you've already told them about claims, evidence, and elaboration? All right. Well, anywho, I'm going to go ahead and read this out loud uh, for all of you. Just follow along, and of course, um, go ahead and underline all of the evidence that you find that why are Chinese, I'm sorry, why are China's dams on the Mekong causing conflict? All right, so Vietnamese President Trong Tan Song obviously had China in mind when he warned recently that tensions over water resources were not only threatening economic growth, but presenting a source of conflict. A day before he issued the warning to business leaders on the sidelines of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, summit in Russia, China had announced that its largest dam on the upper reaches of the Mekong River, Southeast Asia's key artery, has started generating electricity. The New Zhao Dao, I'm sorry, the, the Nuo Jiadu Dam joins four other Chinese dams that have been commissioned on the Mekong River's upper portion, causing rapid changing in water levels and other adverse effects downstream, especially in the four countries of the lower Mekong Basin: Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos, where tens of millions of people depend on the river for food, water, and transportation. The launching of the first power generating unit of the Nuo Jiadu Dam, which at 858 feet is the highest in Asia, was reported exclusively by China's state news agency Xinhua, with little coverage by the world media. Yet, what is happening in China will eventually alter the productive capabilities of Southeast Asia's longest and most important river, a river vital to the sustenance of the 60 million people of the lower Mekong Basin, said Milton Osborne, of a Southeast Asian expert at the Lowy Institute, an international policy think tank in Sydney, Australia. The announcement of the Nuo Jiadu Dam's operations is significant. Beijing claims that the Chinese cascade of dams will not affect downstream countries, saying only 3.5% of the water in the Mekong as a whole flows through China. According to Osborne, however, this claim has been discredited many times over. He believes water from China is of great importance in sustaining dry season flow for the downstream countries, perhaps a total of 40% of the river's volume overall. So with each dam China builds, there's a chance of a greater diminishing of the flow, he said. There is no doubt, he said, that the building of the 5 dams will have other long-term effects downstream, including impacting the amount of nutrient-rich sediment flowing down the river. Ooh, that's some really good evidence, I'd say. Source of conflict. Energy-starved China is using electricity generated by the dams to fuel its rapid economic growth without regard to the adverse impact on its neighbors. The Vietnamese leader Sang suggested without pointing the finger to Beijing, or at Beijing. We cannot deny the fact that tensions over water resources are threatening economic growth in many countries and representing a source of conflict, especially at a time when countries are accelerating their economic development, Sang said. Dam construction and stream adjustments by some countries in upstream rivers can constitute a growing concern for many countries. Putting stress on their relationships, Sang said, the management and use of water resources in the Mekong River are growing into a pressing issue, with direct consequences for Vietnam, especially on rice production. Water resources in the country, including river and underground water, are seriously declining, while floods, sea level rises, high tides, coastal erosion have been exacerbated, he complained. Vietnam, the world's second largest rice exporter, is in the lowest part of the Mekong Basin. China's dams, combined with the construction by Laos of the Xayaburi Dam, the first of 11 proposed dams on the mainstream of the lower Mekong River, will have a major impact on the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, experts say. Some 18 million people live in the delta, where nearly half of Vietnam's rice crops comes from, and which is already vulnerable to sea level rise. In addition, for the first time in several thousand years, the delta is shrinking, studies indicate. Richard Cronin, director of the Southeast Asia program at the Washington-based Stimson Center, said no aspect of China's fast-growing role and influence in the Mekong region is more evident and more problematic than its drive to harness the huge hydroelectric potential of the upper Mekong, he said. For the past 4 completed Chinese dams already have caused rapid changes in the water levels hundreds of kilometers downstream, and notably reduced the flow of vital nutrient-rich sediment that gives the river its immense aquatic and agricultural productivity and sustains the Mekong Delta, Cronin said. Can someone look up what does hydroelectric mean? All right. Then we're going to move on. So the Mekong Delta. On to Cambodia. Cambodia, Southeast Asia's key China ally, is also not spared by China's dam building spree on the Mekong. Cambodia's Tonle Sap, Southeast Asia's largest freshwater lake, which has a close connection with the Mekong River, could also shrink in size, experts say. There is also the likelihood that Cambodia's Great Lake will be reduced in area during the wet season to the detriment of its current vital role as a source of much of Cambodia's protein consumption through its vast bounty of fish, Osborne of the Lowy Institute said. The Cambodian Fishery Coalition, a community-based organization set up by the fishery folk in the country, said in a recent report that the Chinese dams on the Mekong have impacted the lake's fish sanctuary. When the hydropower dams were established, the community people living around the Tonle Sap Lake were severely affected. They have transformed fish resources and led to progressive loss. Aside from fishery resources, the Tonle Sap Lake provides land fertile for the cultivation of rice and other agricultural plants. Last section, regional stability. Cronin said increased competition for access to the rich resources of the once war-torn Mekong region has not only created serious environmental degradation, but also affected regional stability. While the adverse effects of Chinese dams have created friction with its downstream neighbors, their governments have been loath to complain, Cronin said. China is a huge market for their natural resources and agricultural exports. Laos and Cambodia particularly are major recipients of Chinese infrastructure development aid. An almost complete lack of transparency makes it difficult to establish with certainty how China operates its dams. Cronin said that several times during the past several years, Beijing has been accused of withholding water, except for short releases timed to allow its boats to operate. During periods of severe drought in Yunnan province, where the dams are located, China's disregard for its neighbors' interests has generated a growing store of ill will in downstream countries, he said. So the picture there, multiple dams are an ominous threat to life on the Mekong River. In a remote part of northern Laos, history is being made. Construction has begun on the final stage of the 3.5 billion Zaibare Dam, the first dam to span the entire mainstream of the lower Mekong River. Okay, fine, I'll be done. Thank you, kids, for listening. Have a good day.